So here, this is another point, and I think one of the problems with the book, sorry, is that I tried to take on a lot. I did. I really tried to take on a lot of issues. I felt like I'm a black man in London and I'm not a criminal, and I want to show the world that, you know, not all of us are criminals and not all of us own guns and not all of us want to kill white people. Do you understand? But there were other issues that that are serious. Like in London, suicide is a big issue within the black community, especially or particularly among black men. And one, I think this, the official statistic when I was writing this was that they were 6 times more likely than a white man of the same age to kill themselves. And I couldn't understand that, and of course I was doing a little bit of research, not much, but a little. And they said, and I found out things like most of the black men who died, in fact I think it was 95% of the black men who died within 24 hours of having met with a professional, like a psychoanalyst. So that freaked me out. I was like, what is going on? What are they saying? What is going on? And so this, what I want to read to you is once, well, in the book, if you don't know, there are 2 characters who have a suicide pact, 2 young black men, and they both decide to jump off a tower block. One of them dies, and the other, James, when he recovers, he is interviewed by a psychotherapist. And this was my take on that scenario. Okay, why did you choose that particular tower? You mean to jump, said James. I didn't choose, it was Ashwin's idea. He'd heard that lots of people were doing it from there because they're disgusting, those towers, they're ugly. They're thinking of knocking them down, said Trevor. Trevor is the psychoanalyst. They've been thinking about doing a lot of things around here, but let me tell you, they ain't gonna do shit. How do you feel about being rescued from the roof? Terrific. Do you want to tell me why you tried to kill yourself? Because I know who I want to be, and I keep getting forced into being someone else. What do you mean by that? James lifted the plaster holding the IV tube in his arm and tried to scratch around the needle. He breathed deeply. Think of every tired cliche you've ever heard about black men. I'm trying desperately hard not to be that. I don't want to become a stereotype. Everyone thinks they know me, but they don't. I don't suppose it matters to you. Everything I think has already been thought, said James. Everything I feel has already been felt. Everything I want to do has been done. It's like I don't matter. People who don't even know me are already tired of me. I'm only ever going to be what I don't want to be. You keep saying that, said Trevor. What do you mean? James wanted Trevor to take him seriously. I was on the train last week, he said, and I got into a fight. I sat down opposite a black guy. He looked a few years older than me. He had on baggy jeans, big Timberland boots, and a t-shirt 3 sizes too big. He was just looking at me. Out of the blue, he asked me what I was looking at. Nothing was all I said. We spent the next 3 or 4 stops staring each other down, like really staring each other down. I didn't want to look at him, but I didn't want him to think I was backing down or scared of him, even though I was. I was really scared, but I wanted to be strong, you know? I wanted to let him know I wasn't afraid of him being up in my face the way he was. By the 6th or 7th stop, I gave up. I looked away, but he just wouldn't stop staring. What? I finally asked him at the 9th stop. He didn't answer, but he got up when I did and he followed me off the train. After we got through the ticket barrier, he called me a name. He said something about the tightness of my jeans. I called him a name, and I called his old man a name, and the whole line of the men in his family names. And, said Trevor, and he slapped me, which is supposed to be like a big diss. What do you mean? My brother, my older brother, 4, he bitch slaps people when he knows they can't fight him. Oh right, so what happened next? We fought. The only reason I fought him was because 4 said that real tough guys, they don't talk. When they want to fight, they fight, and this guy was all talk. Plus, he followed me off at my stop with a real tough guy who would have kicked off on the train. It didn't last long anyway. A bunch of people pulled us apart. I had marks on my neck from his fingernails. It was nothing really, but for about a week, every time I saw the marks in the mirror, I felt the shame of fighting with another black guy. I was pushed into doing what I would never want to do. The thought stalked me, this idea of being forced into things that I don't want to do. That's the story of my life and the lives of everyone else I know. We get pushed around. In the end, we become what we never imagined we would. I don't want to live like that, not ever. I know nobody gives a shit. Who would? Trevor was silent a while. He looked at James intently, and then he wrote something else down. Were you reading Baldwin at the time? What time? On the train, the fight? No. What's so bad about being called a name? Nothing, James said quickly. I guess. One last question, if you don't mind. If you could be anywhere right now, where would it be? Far away from here on a hill, surrounded by tall trees and a lake and some grass. Grass, do you mean marijuana? Trevor held up his clip, poised to make a note. I don't smoke weed. I mean grass like in a garden. Trevor looked at James and he smiled. Do you ever leave your estate? James sighed and closed his eyes. Sometimes he went to the city at lunchtime. He would buy a frothy coffee and sit in the window of a Starbucks or eat a pub lunch in the 7 Stars. He liked watching the robed barristers and the white men in suits, trying to see where he might fit in one day. Once he saw a tall, angular, dark-skinned black man in his late 30s wearing a pen lodged in the breast pocket of a navy blue suit, with a clean white shirt, with initials fancily sewn into his cuffs. At first, he just walked by, and they merely eyed each other. Then he stopped and turned back to face James, moved his newspaper from under his left armpit to his right. Then he looked at his wristwatch, a Rolex, the same as 4 had brought 3 for his last birthday. James thought he was just showing off at first, but then he watched the movements of the man's body, his anxious eyes, the way he would hesitate and begin again, seeming scared, like he knew he was one false move away from the street. James didn't want to be like that, but he didn't want to say any of this to Trevor. I'll stop there.
That's great.
Yes.
To switch sort of topics a little bit, could you talk to us a little bit about the sort of nuts and bolts of the book? I was thinking specifically about structure. The book, it sort of, you're almost given everything about the characters right up front. We know things about Nina, really, like that she was married, I think 6 times, 6 times. And, you know, we just know a lot about the character's experiences sort of right up front. And then later on, it sort of dives deeper and we get into more of that backstory. Did you ever think about having the book be more chronological, and sort of what were your thoughts in sort of putting everything out up front?
Again, it's one of those things. I wish that I could say something really fanciful about, you know, the plot and what I did, but I wrote all of this stuff, and there was a lot of, as I say, I was in a place, and there was a lot in there that I guess was too much, and my original editor in London, she cut a lot. So, and then when we put it all together, it just came out this way.
Yes.
I don't have anything smart or edgy to say about that. It just, you know, and I think with first time authors, it is, and I listen to these interviews a lot. I go to readings and I sit there, and they seem to always have their stories nailed. This is how I did it, and this is where it came from. In terms of the actual writing, like I said, I was pretty much, I'd left home, I'd left London, that's where I grew up, and I was here. I had another book that I had written that was rejected, and I came here and I was feeling a little bit lost, wasn't sure about what I was going to do next, and this came out, and so when I read it, I feel like you know, I could have put this here and this could have been different, but it's just, you know, it's just what happened.
Yeah.
Sort of with that, the book is told from the point of view of several different characters, mainly Mina and James, but then thrown in towards the end are one of James's brothers. James's brothers too are all numbered, so that's why when Peter read his section,
Yeah,
he talked about, I think, 4 and 5, and 3 and 4, so that's part of it. So 5 tells one of the debtors, and Bloom does as well.
Yeah.
Were you scared about that, or?
No, not really. Again, there is, I guess, an industry standard. There's a way that you're supposed to do this, I guess, but I wasn't really, I wasn't concerned with that. I was trying to get something, I was trying to tell a story. And to begin with, I wasn't even trying to do that. I was trying to just be a part of documenting what was going on in my, in the place, the area that I grew up. The thing I just forgot, and I just remembered, the reason why I decided that I wanted to touch on Somalia was because, and this was the point with the whole Shainka thing, the UK has a history of looking at other countries and looking at other issues that are occurring in different parts of the world. And you know, I read every day a story. Well, while I was in London, I read every day a story about Somalia. This is, I think it just won it again. It wins the award every year for the most lawless place in the world. And they've got, I think, the biggest growing industry at the moment, which is piracy. But I wanted not to focus. I felt it would be too easy for me, living and growing up in the East End of London, putting out this book that was about gangs and fighting in East London. I wanted to compare it to somewhere else. I also wanted to say, I also wanted the reader to think about what's actually going on now. There is like, I think the war in Somalia now has been going for like 14 years.
Yes.
And the biggest group of immigrants to London are Somalis. And pretty much most of the newer immigrants, and we're talking about, you know, 350,000, they seek asylum in the UK. They've been displaced. So when they come into London, they're given flats, they're given apartments to live in the inner cities, in areas like mine. So what happens, you get people like me who are born, bred in London. You get people who have been in, white people who have been in London all their lives. Although I was born in London and raised there, my parents are Nigerians. So I've never felt like I fit in, you know, that whole story about duality and blah, blah, blah. I am that. I'm not English because they don't really embrace being black. And I'm not Nigerian because when I went to Nigeria, my restaurant and my cinema, they just laughed at me and said, what are you doing here? So, you know, that whole thing, you know, most of the great writers, they write about that feeling. But what's happening now, or what was happening, I found, was that lots of the murders were happening because people that had sought asylum in London, when violence erupts, and it always does in the places like this, and whereas if I get into a fight, and I don't do that often, especially not now, I'm older and stuff, but when I was a bit younger, like everybody else, you get into trouble. But whereas, you know, you get a black eye and you go home and you clean up and then you come back out, with the people that are from real violence, it's very different. And this is what the newspapers weren't picking up on.